Welcome back to the Librarians of Solana podcast. My name is T. I am one of the librarians here in Solana in the world of Wraith. And today we are joined by Brodie Spurlock. Brodie, how are you doing?
Hey everybody, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on the show, T.
Yeah, no problem. Welcome to the library. For those watching, you might know Brodie from top 8ing every single Flesh and Blood event that's ever been hosted, or from hanging out with a chill group of guys at events. But today we're going to break down some of the discussion topics that we've set aside. We're talking about how we think the state of Flesh and Blood is and everything that's going on right now, as well as some Bright Lights discussion, how we think Worlds is going to go. There's a lot of cool stuff coming up in this episode for the pod, so make sure you stay tuned till the end. Brodie, we just came back from Nationals and a couple Battle Hardens. It's been a couple of off weeks, but also not off weeks because I know you just got home from Portland. So how do you think your Nationals event went?
So, Nats was, first of all, a lot of fun. I think my biggest takeaway from the tournament was that I felt like I was like 120% prepared for CC, and then, I don't know, 60-70% prepared for draft, and so maybe I didn't budget my time perfectly. CC, I went 7-1 playing Lexi. This deck is what I've been playing pretty much nonstop since Pro Tour Baltimore and the time leading up to that. I took a couple tournaments off to play Oldhim right before he LL'd and played Dromai at one Battle Harden and Dash at one Battle Harden, but other than those two, it's just been all Lexi for me. So a lot of experience on the hero. I put a lot of time into practice and my deck list. So CC, I felt really good. Probably the most prepared I've been for any tournament ever. But Monarch Draft, I think I didn't spend enough time prioritizing getting like real life practice. And even though I did talk with people about Monarch Draft and I tested with my team and I got to do some local drafts, once I got to Nats, I just had a couple situations that came up where I felt like enough extra reps with the format probably would have helped me make the right choice. And I had a 50-50 that I didn't know, and on some of them I probably did the wrong thing because of lack of experience. And there was one game in particular where I was playing Bolton and I had like a Lumina Ascension deck, and my whole game plan was just to set up a huge like quadruple hatchet turn. And I was playing in such a way where I was like blocking out a lot, and I was in the neighborhood of being fatigable. And the plan was, because I was going to pop off with such a big Lumina turn, I wouldn't get fatigued. But I planned to like follow that up with a final take flight Valiant Thrust turn after the Lumina turn to make sure I had enough damage to close the game. And I had like one pitch decision really early in the middle of the game where I like pitched a red instead of a blue because I was basically like 3-card blocking my opponent and then just hatcheting them. And I decided to pitch some red card instead of a blue, and it made it so that when I got to the take flight turn, because of the way my Lumina like banished the top of my deck, I didn't have a blue, and just like little micro things like that, where I think just like that one tiny mistake cost me the game because it made it so that my take flight turn didn't work, and then I ended up getting fatigued out even though I got my quadruple hatchet. So basically all of this to say, I think if I had put more time into Monarch, I would have seen more success at Nats, but overall still a really fun weekend.
Do you think with more practice you might have discovered something that you could have done different in the draft portion, or did it come down to just like a micro interaction with pitch stacking in the game?
I think both. With that particular game, I definitely think the only way I would have known to think about that was basically having played enough drafts that I had practiced with Lumina Bolton before, or if I had just thought, I guess, if I had spent more time in that moment thinking and like considering all the possibilities, it's possible I would have found it. But at the time, my brain was just like, in second cycle, I'm gonna have plenty of blues. I'd rather put this red back, and that was not the case. So I think that one was purely gameplay. But I did feel like in my drafts as well, I felt pretty prepared. But especially in day one, I had put very little time into chain. I was kind of on the I'm just not gonna draft chain plan unless it really feels like it is my seat. And I pack one picked one a Dimensional Crossroads, which I think is
It's a
a
good one.
bomb in the set.
Yeah.
Really good. So I was like looking at it versus just like some premium common, and like sitting there like, do I want to go down this road? I know I have very little chain practice, and ultimately I did decide to take the crossroads and try to draft chain. But I think I had, not counting Monarch drafts from like months prior when I just randomly drafted locally without knowing it was the Nats format, only in my dedicated Nats prep, I think I had at most two drafts where I was chain, so very little experience. So I think that was probably like the biggest thing where I felt like my preparation was lacking. I ended up drafting chain on day one and had to go off of pure like theory slash what I had talked about with people, but no actual firsthand experience.
And how did that end up going for you? What was your record for day one draft?
Chain deck ended up going 1-2. I had a game where I lost a chain mirror, and then another game where, oh, what happened? One of the game, I think so. One of the games was a chain mirror where I won, and Dimensional Crossroads did a lot of work in that game. One of them was a chain mirror where I got run over. Not totally run over, but I did lose pretty convincingly. It was against Tyler Horsepool, and he outraced me with his chain deck. And I don't remember for sure what happened in the third game. I think I might have ended up getting fatigued, even though I had Crossroads in my deck, which often helps combat fatigue because you can deal so much arcane damage. But yeah, I finished that draft 1-2.
Yeah, Dimensional Crossroads is really powerful, but it's one of those things where you have to hit, you have to like find the card, and it's not Dread Scythe, so it can only add so much power level to a Monarch chain deck. But still, you had a really good performance at Nationals, especially 7-1 in constructed overall, and that shows through in every tournament that we ever see you play because you always manage to find yourself at the top. How did Battle Hardened Portland go for you this past weekend?
Portland was a lot of fun. So Saturday was the Team Blitz event. So it was me, Michael Fang, and Lucas Oswald. Um, that was our trio, and we made it to the top four, which is that's like the single elimination cutoff for team events. They usually do top four instead of top eight, since realistically top four is 12 people. Um, and I was on Chain, Lucas was on Dash, and Michael was on Briar. And I think we played pretty well all day. I think we all learned a couple things, made one or two mistakes here and there, but it was a really fun experience. Team events usually are in general, just getting to kind of help each other and like play three games at once. And there's like a lot of potential strategy you can think about. Deciding who was in each seat, like ABC, was kind of a cool puzzle, like trying to basically just out mind game the other teams. There's some real logic to who sits in the middle, but once you have that, A and C is just like purely psychology, and it was a lot of fun. We, I think, decided that Briar probably was not a great pick. We did put a lot of time into this event testing, and we were having a hard time deciding what our third hero was going to be. And I think all three of us regret that it ended up being that Briar deck, but it was solid. Of course, we made the top four. It was a fun day. And then the PTI tournament on Sunday was CC, and though I would have played Lexi if all I cared about was trying to do uh, the best as possible at that event, I decided to take Briar because it was like the actual last chance to ever play her. And I pretty much never do this. I almost always will say I want to play the best deck no matter what. I enjoy almost every hero in this game. I think it's fun to learn new ones. So though I do have biases, I will just play what's best. Um, and then twice ever, I've made like a very conscious exception to that. Once was when Chain was about to LL. At least at the time, I felt like Starvo was a better pick for that ProQuest, and I took Chain instead, and I had a ton of fun, and I don't regret it. But of course, I fittingly lost to Starvo in the finals. Um, Honestly, now I'm questioning whether Starvo was even a strictly better deck. I think Chain was very strong as well. But yeah, I had a lot of fun playing Briar. Made it once again to the top four, but was slain by Punkage, Ethnic Smoke on Icelander, and ended my run. But I'm
He
glad
had
I got to
a
play.
he had a hell of a run, didn't he? Because he played Michael Feng in top eight, you in top four, and then Lucas in finals, right?
Yeah, it was funny. He killed our whole Battle Hardened team in one fell swoop.
He said, "Team event who? I'm taking this down in the solos." So that's really funny. Holy, but good weekend overall.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had fun hanging out with everyone and solid finishes. I can't complain.
Heck yeah. How do you feel? about like this nickname that you've been given for top eighting all these events? I remember at the Atlanta Battle Hardened, whenever they were calling the top eight, they were like, "And our golden boy, Brodie Spurlock."
The nicknames are they're fun. I don't mind them. For the most part I enjoy them. Kid Wonder Bread has kind of stuck
Kid
just
Wonder.
because
Holy, that's such a good one.
the uh the ham sandwiches. I know they've become a meme, but like I just needed to be clear to everyone out there that they were never intended to be a meme. I just legitimately am content eating 10 sandwiches in a weekend and I do it every time and I enjoy it. And then yeah, that's just the food I eat.
There it is. I mean, hey, if it works, it works. Obviously, there's something in those ham sandwiches that's giving you the power to top eight everything, so it's working.
Oh, speaking of that, fun fact, Lucas matched me this weekend, sandwich for sandwich. He said going in, especially because Saturday we're on the same team, so we're going to be playing together all day. He said every time I eat a sandwich, he's going to eat a sandwich, and he stuck to it all weekend. And then he got to the finals of the PTI event, and though he did lose in the finals, they split. It's a pretty normal split in PTI events. The winner takes the PTI and second gets the gold foil. And then he opened gold foil Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. So he was basically the real winner on Sunday. So I don't know. There's the science is there. The proof is there. The sandwiches work.
That's a much better one than the one he opened after Columbus, because they did that split for the PTI event in Columbus as well, and he
Yeah.
opened Mage Master boots, so that one was not so hot.
I suppose he was due for
He was due for a pouncing lynx at least. Yeah, that's not a bad one to open too. That's like 1,400 bucks. So a little
That's really
payday
good.
for second place. So you do so well at all these events, and I know somewhat recently you've started testing a little bit with the wolf pack, correct?
Yeah.
You've been running with the wolf pack. How do you personally prepare for events? How do you test for events?
So I guess the first major question is it just a one format event or is it split usually between draft and CC? And I think often Flesh and Blood kind of works in these seasons of like leading up to majors. Like for example, this year we had Pro Tour where the moment Outsiders released, there were several smaller events like Battle Hardens and then like the Chicago Brawl and these things leading up to ultimately Pro Tour, which is the same meta. And then we kind of repeated that with a different meta for Nats, and that's what's about to happen again for Worlds. So in a way, all of the smaller Battle Hardened events are kind of part of my testing process for the major. I care a lot about trying to do well at the Battle Hardens, and ultimately I'm going to still try to play the best deck there. But it's like a nice opportunity to try things live and maybe submit some risky card choices in my deck list or play a hero that I currently think is second best, but I need to get a feel in the field of like maybe it actually is the best deck. So it's kind of interesting. I like prepare for the smaller tournaments, um, but like part of that is warped by the fact that I'm ultimately trying to prepare for the major, and the smaller tournaments themselves are part of my prep in that sense. Um, you mentioned the Wolfpack. That's my testing team. So we, get together in Discord calls and jam. Usually Talishar now. Used to be TTS. I think most people have converted over to Talishar. Basically, just like the way the Wolfpack does it is, I guess it depends, like how far into the meta we are, but at least at some point, most people kind of have the heroes they're starting to lean toward for a given major or season, and then we kind of all just help each other. Like, if you need reps into a particular matchup, you go to the person who is currently working on that hero, and likely they're happy to get reps into you too because hopefully we're all playing like pretty top tier decks that you're gonna likely face at the major. And several of us, I think, play a lot of different heroes. So even if someone's not currently working on a deck, they'll be happy to help you with a matchup. Or maybe you'll like trade reps in, for example, like let's say none of our players are playing Icelander at an upcoming tournament, but Icelander's a hero you really need to have a plan into. You need to have some experience playing your hero into her if you haven't yet. Then we will each like take turns playing Icelander into each other and like quote unquote trade reps. So that's really nice, just having the testing team to bounce ideas off of and get reps into other players who are like putting a lot of time in and serious about the game. And then if there's draft as well, like there has been for Pro Baltimore Nats and Bright Lights draft upcoming at Worlds, that is a whole added element, which for me, the way my schedule and testing process usually works, I think is harder. And like I mentioned, I think I didn't do a great job of managing it for Nats because on average, all of these smaller battle hardened events tend to be constructed. Some of them are sealed, and often the sealed ones have like top eight draft, so there's some opportunity to practice limited, but there's a bias towards CC in general with all these events. So I think I have to make more of a point to really prioritize getting limited practice. And I found that though online drafting is really helpful to get more reps, something about it isn't the same for me as feeling the cards and just kind of like seeing the draft pod play out in person. I really like getting some in-person drafts in. So I think prioritizing trying to like organize some of my local fab friends together and get drafts whenever I can in person is a big priority for me leading up to Worlds. It helps a lot when there is a qualifying season or maybe a skirmish season in the months before the major that runs the draft format. Like before Nats, there was a skirmish season. It was split between Blitz and draft, but all of the skirmishes in my area, or at least the ones I could attend, were Blitz. So I didn't actually get Monarch draft practice at that time. And this upcoming ProQuest season is split, of course, between CC and Bright Lights draft because that is presumably what the next Pro Tour is going to be. And because I am trying to make it to every battle hardened and calling that I can, I'm actually pretty sure I'm not going to play a single ProQuest this season. So I will be getting to compete a lot and engage with Flesh and Blood a lot, but it's going to be all Classic Constructed. I think at least in those weeks, and I'll be missing out on the potential opportunity to draft more at some of those ProQuests. So yeah, that's kind of like my general testing process. Testing with a team is nice, and I would say like my biggest flaw right now is not enough time spent on limited, or maybe not an efficient enough approach to how I'm preparing for draft.
I think it's really important to get paper draft practice, like you said, one, for just being able to tangibly hold the cards. It's easier to think about patterns for what you're looking to come back around in a pack, especially when you can physically hold the cards. It's much easier to do it that way than testing online with a draft or anything. But I also think it's really important with draft to get practice in with people who you don't regularly test with. If you test with the same people for draft, it can definitely get stale, or you get like someone forcing the same thing over and over, and you can kind of tell who's going to draft what beforehand if people aren't just like immediately drafting open. So I think that testing with outside players from outside of a team is really important as well. And tangibly testing does help a lot for draft. I wish there were more events in my area personally. I can't even get an armory.
Yeah, 100%. That's one of the nice things too about like the qualifying season events when it's like a skirmish or ProQuest. You play two drafts in Swiss and then another draft in the top eight. Um, Likely you're going to get a pretty diverse mix of players across those three drafts, as opposed to like if you run a draft camp day, at least where I am, it is in reality what's likely going to happen is there's going to be eight or nine people who care enough and are prepping for the major and want to show up, and then you're going to draft with those same people three times. So I think the qualifying seasons running draft is a unique opportunity to practice the format with a lot of different faces, like all in one day and specifically in person.
Yeah, I can explicitly remember the RTN season before Worlds where it was Uprising draft. I remember going to I was living in Roanoke at the time, so I was able to go to a local RTN at a store called Blade, and there were 40 or 50 people there for that RTN, and I went 9-0, 6-0 in Swiss and 3-0 in top 8. And it was just three really solid drafts with really solid players, being able to figure out some of that draft format and then taking that with me to Worlds to go 5-1 at Worlds too. So I think that definitely those, even the smaller events like skirmishes can definitely help. I think that that's where a lot of people are a little bit more lacking in practice for bigger events. So if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, should I go to a skirmish? Should I go to a ProQuest? And it's limited. Need the practice, go out there and get them. That practice in.
For sure. And one last thing to mention for anyone who wants more draft practice but just can't realistically get that many in-person reps, the Runaways has a public draft server on Discord where they're just like, especially in the weeks leading up when everyone's trying to grind, they're constantly firing drafts using draftfab.com, or I don't know if it's .com or .net, but I think that's a really good resource for people who are just like wanting to jam more. It is, for me, like I think it's not quite as helpful when it's online versus in person, but it's still infinitely more than not doing a draft. So I think it's a really helpful resource.
Yeah, I took advantage of that before this last nationals, and it definitely helped out. Some of the arrangements of the packs on there are not perfect always, but even just getting some amount of practice or seeing how the cards interact with each other against other players who are also meaning to test for the same reasons can help you out a lot. Like you'll test with a bunch of people. There were drafts firing like every 30 minutes on there, so it's very useful tool, and especially once Bright Lights comes out, you can take advantage of that on there as well. So definitely be looking for that. Runaways Discord, great resource, great team, great people. Everything about that Discord is helpful.
100%.
So I have a few questions that I have written down here that I do a rapid questions interview every time I have somebody on. The way this is going to work is I'm going to ask a question, and you have to answer it as fast as possible. That way you don't get a whole bunch of time to think about your answer. I just kind of get the honest answer out of you for these questions. Are you ready?
All right, let's do it. Rapid questions.
Rapid questions. What is your favorite hero?
Sarai.
What is your favorite card?
Become the Arc Knight. Also a Viscera card.
I'm sensing a theme here. What's your favorite weapon?
Oh. All right. If it's supposed to be rapid fire, the first thing that came to mind is Rosetta Thorn, but yeah, gonna have to lock in Rosetta Thorn for now. Maybe I'll find a new one.
Runeblade, Runeblade, Runeblade. It's all sevens up here on this slot machine. What is your favorite event that you've ever played?
That's such a good question. I am gonna have to go with Pro Tour Baltimore. I think that's the most memorable one for me.
Because of the top 8 or any other reason?
It was the top 8. I had 2 teammates in top 8 and 2 teammates in top 8 at the calling. Michael Fang, who is my teammate and one of my best friends in Fab, won the event. Almost my whole team was there, and it was one of the first times I really got to spend a lot of time in person, building connections with the Wolfpack. Just a lot of great memories from that weekend.
That's awesome. Heck yeah, I've got a sweet picture from that event where you granted Matt W a sandwich that got him into top 8 of the calling, so that was pretty funny too.
I remember that, yeah.
What is your favorite place that you've attended a tournament so far? Like your favorite city, favorite venue?
It's definitely one of the international trips. It's kind of hard to choose. They've all been quite fun, but I think I'm going to go with Auckland, New Zealand. That was really special.
Did you get to like go check things out in the area, or were you just there for the tournament?
I did, yeah. I got to spend, I think it was a little over a week. I got to both see around New Zealand, kind of visit some touristy stuff, and also hang out with the local fab scene and play a couple armories. I actually played in the very first store to ever host a fab event, so that was really cool, meeting like the locals, and a lot of them had been around since the start of the game.
That's really cool. That is a very good answer. And finally, my curated question for you, Brodie Spurlock. What is your favorite mid-event sandwich?
Favorite mid-event sandwich? Okay. I'll give the spicy answer on this one. Never before seen. Bread, ham, third ham, bread. It's usually 2 slices. Mid-event, when I'm really needing that pick-me-up, we'll go 3 slices of ham in the middle. That's my answer.
That is a spicy sandwich for sure. Well, not in the literal sense, but that will conclude our rapid fire questions and bring in the meat of the pod. But not quite a third slice of ham, but instead it will be a ban list discussion. We initially set up recording this pod for today because we were supposed to get the ban list this morning. Today is Tuesday the 19th as we're recording. But then it ended up coming out last night. And we saw the announcement and thought, is there enough to discuss with the changes that happened? And we ended up still making it the meat of the pod because I do think that there is plenty to discuss about these. And so that is the announcement that Briar and Rosetta Thorn have officially reached Living Legend status in Classic Constructed and will be retired on the 22nd of September. Sorry about your favorite weapon. It is Dunyan Rings. And
It is gone.
and then we also got an announcement that they're going to bring back Bullseye Bracers once Lexi achieves Living Legend. So they moved it from banned to suspended until Lexi achieves Living Legend. No changes in Blitz, no changes in other formats. Those are the only changes. But that's a spicy one to discuss because bringing back Bullseye Bracers increases a lot of the power level potentially with new Riptide cards. It increases Azalea's power level back. It gives Azalea some play around Warmongers. So what are your thoughts on what happens when Bullseye Bracers comes back if Lexi's Living Legend?
I was pretty excited about this part of the band announcement. I enjoyed playing Azalea a little bit earlier this year, and also Riptide. I know a lot of people were disappointed when Bullseye Bracers got banned because they've been brewing Riptide, and he just kind of like got hit for Lexi's crimes. Um, so I think this is a good change. I think it will obviously buff those two heroes. It's easily the best arm piece Ranger has access to. The card is a little bit crazy, to be honest, because it has built-in AB and the ability is so strong. But I don't think it's broken or anything like that by any means. But definitely, basically just a huge bump for the two Rangers and saves them sideboard slots as well. Is a big piece like Azalea currently is playing. A lot of the decks are playing, what's the card called? Bracers of Belief as kind of their main proactive arm piece, and then also running Null Rune Gloves. So those two just get condensed back into one slot in the 80. Overall impression is I am happy with the change, and I am excited to maybe play Azalea again.
A lot of people were calling for some bans out of Lexi, even with Lexi being so close to Living Legend. Do you think that you're satisfied with no changes and just letting Lexi Living Legend out, or do you wish that something had been hit from the deck to make it a little bit less powerful before it achieves Living Legend here in a month or two?
I was going to be okay with either outcome. I think what they said makes sense. I understand the reasoning behind this. Basically, Lexi's very close to the finish line, and it is true that there are several other heroes in this meta that A, can compete and can put up good results and can easily get first place, and B, other heroes that can target Lexi. She has some rough matchups, like Uzuri is one that people have messed around with a lot to try to actively hunt the Lexis. And I think both of those things are reasonable. I do think Lexi has like multiple cards in the deck that are very powerful and above rate, and uh, in a vacuum, she's super strong. So I would not have been surprised to see them hit one of the Majestics, like maybe three of a kind. To be honest, that's what I thought they were probably going to do, but I really didn't have a strong preference one way or the other. I have a lot of experience on Lexi from playing her so much this year. She's probably the hero I have put the most time into in all of Flesh and Blood at this point. So I, from a personal perspective, am I am excited to get to play her a bit more in a new meta where there's a new deck building puzzle, because that's my favorite part about Lexi is there's so many things you can do with the deck list. She has such a wide card pool. So ultimately, I do think some people are not super happy because she's been dominating for a while and she is going to continue to dominate through ProQuest season, almost definitely. Um, but the other part of the announcement that we can talk about is that she is basically certainly going to be gone for Worlds, and I like that that is a certainty.
Yeah, they put that date in there to make sure that there's going to be another check right before Worlds. It can shake up the format. The only concern for me with that being the way that it is if we have a breakout hero from Bright Lights that is just way overtuned or way better than anything we have now. If we have a Starvo type hero in Bright Lights, something coming or some tool set that Dash is going to gain or Tech Leveson is going to gain, then we could just be looking at another stale format for a big event like Worlds, which could be a problem with with the Fab community especially doesn't like seeing breakout decks like Starvo or Lexi just taking large chunks of the meta. And I think that's something that a lot of players just don't see happening in other card games a lot, so they come over to Fab and think it's a negative thing. When it can be a positive thing as well. Triangle metas, I think, are the most healthy metas in a card game because you have 3 defined best decks that can fight each other pretty square, and then outside shots can sometimes get in. What are your thoughts on that change time?
I think potential breakout decks from the new set being too dominant, that's definitely a concern. The to recap for anyone who didn't read the entirety of the band announcement, they basically said the next announcement is immediately after the ProQuest season ends and after calling Melbourne. So it'll be all 3 classic constructed callings will have concluded, and it's a bit under 2 weeks before Worlds.
I think it's on the 12th,
So
right?
I think the announcement is on the 6th of November. While T's pulling it up, basically they said we're scheduling this announcement mostly as an LL checkpoint. If Lexi and or potentially Icelander have reached 1,000 points, then this will give them the opportunity to get out of the format before Worlds. But they said unless something catastrophic happens and a change is really needed, they're not planning to make any other changes to manage the format during that announcement. It's just an LL check. So I think if we do have something as oppressive as Starvo come out of Bright Lights, it's possible that they would emergency ban is not the right word, but that they would use that scheduled announcement date to hit it a bit to have a healthier format for Worlds. But most likely that won't happen. Hopefully, Bright Lights has similar power level to something like I think Uprising and Outsiders have both been pretty solid sets for pushing powerful new heroes into the meta, but not completely dominating the format with the new releases. I maybe was an exception with Stubbies. He kind of did dominate, but that got handled pretty quickly. And after that, I think all 3 Uprising heroes have been huge movers and shakers in CC, but not too terribly dominant. Icelander
Yeah.
Icelander was pushing it at one point, but she also got a couple hits, and now I think serves a pretty healthy role in the metagame.
I think if the power level is similar to Uprising or Outsiders, then it will be a situation where like one of these decks might be better than anything else that we have, but one little fix can bring the deck back into reality, keeping it playable without completely tanking it, which is a big fear with a lot of changes that have been happening recently. That was my personal fear of what would happen with Lexi if they did ban something. Like if you ban 3 of a kind or Rain Razors or Bolt and Shot or something that would hinder the deck too much, you might end up with another Viserai or Phi situation where you've banned too much from the deck and then it kind of very much falls out of popularity or falls out of contention for top 8 events and just lives in the bottom tables of events until it inevitably gets more support and is equally broken.
Yeah, I think you could say the same thing happened with Briar. She was so strong originally, made it to, I actually don't know the number, but I think above 800 points, and then got nerfed and kind of slowly crept her way back up until eventually being a top deck again in LLing.
Yeah. And I did double check. You are correct. The banned and suspended check that is really a living legend check is going to be Monday, November 6th, which is 11 days before the start of the World Championship. So if there is a breakout deck and they do have to emergency ban or emergency suspend, however you want to call it, if they do have to hit something from Bright Lights, that could also create a really, really interesting Worlds environment where you have what is almost a brand new format 11 days before you start playing. I'm a fan of things.
I know it's something that some players find very exciting and it's one of their favorite things is like a super fresh meta with a very limited amount of time to prepare. It is super exciting, especially for coverage and people watching from home. But I know some people are equally afraid of it and, really care a lot about preparing and showing up as best prepared as possible for the World Championship, and so they don't like the sound of something like that. I think what LSS has done is I'm pretty happy with it. It's what I was hoping for, which is that they are going to give Lexi and Icelander the opportunity to LL because those heroes have been dominating for quite a while. But their plan is not to actively make any other changes, and B, they told us that. I think the fact that they made it clear that they're not planning to make any surprise changes probably has given peace of mind to a lot of players who are worried about 11 days not being enough time to prepare.
Yeah. So it looks like we're going to be expecting a pretty well-rounded set out of bright lights to maybe shake up the meta a little bit, but not entirely uproot what we've been seeing. And by then, it could just be the deck, but people will have discovered answers for the way that these decks play. I'm really interested to see it because Mechanologist is my favorite class, Dash is my favorite hero, Plasma Pistol is my favorite weapon. So I'm excited to see if those are still playable, if I can bring out an army of tree frogs, or if I'm going to be looking at something like 45 blues that play cards from Banish and feel like Chain. So
I'm excited. Tekla seems really cool. I am very excited to see where that goes.
we just got a new spoiler yesterday that was a young hero, Max Nitro.
Yeah,
Have you taken a look at that hero yet?
I have. I'll pull it up to make sure I'm remembering the text correctly. But yeah, here we go. Max Nitro. He basically has hyperdriver synergy and then also this new mechanic Crank, which I'm not is this the first card we've seen Crank on?
I believe so, yes.
Which is pretty cool. It is there is no inherent value attached to it. You're removing a steam counter to gain an action point, which in a total vacuum, I think the game values steam counters at 1, the same way a single point of attack or a single resource or a single action point is valued. But it's pretty cool to have that added flexibility of being able to convert your resources around even more, especially in a class like mech where, at least historically, like with the pistol package, there's a lot of like um, one resource here, one resource there, like interactions where a lot of the playing the deck feels like converting your resources into steam counters and like taking all these little game actions. So being able to convert your steam counters back into resources to potentially convert to steam counters on other items, like it seems like a cool vibe.
I think it's going to be really cool. It also enables things like Plasma Mainline that we got in previous sets but haven't really gotten a chance to look at as being really playable. Like being able to have a Plasma Mainline and turn my yellow hyperdriver tokens that this is making into red ones that could also alternatively just be yellows that make an action point seems really powerful, and I think that this is really cool. Max Nitro, definitely excited to play with. I think that this could end up just being some ridiculous combo deck, maybe. It's got all the right tools for it to be a random setup into combo deck. So maybe this is gonna play a little bit like Wizard or something. I don't know. Find
I
out.
know I know Nitro Mechanoid fans are excited because we have this is the first hero that has like direct synergy with hyperdrivers and literally straight up creates them so you don't have to rely as much on just drawing them or playing cards like Blessing of Ingenuity. So it's pretty cool that this will maybe be like a dedicated, kind of like the Crouching Tiger Katsu deck that has been seeing some play for the last year. Like eventually maybe we'll get a dedicated Crouching Tiger Ninja. That feels like what this is for mech. Like he could be the mechanoid hero.
Yeah, and it seems like we'll be getting some Crouching Tiger support, speaking of that, in the round table, because the Ira deck is Crouching Tiger themed. So maybe that gets a buff here coming up soon too. That'll be interesting. A lot of fallen back niche decks that are getting some support, or like cards from before that didn't really ever take off, getting some amount of support to possibly see daylight in a competitive scene. It's a very cool concept to me.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
And then another one that we've seen is Dash Database. New young Dash that lets you look at the top card of your deck at any time. And then once per turn, you may play a Mechanologist item with cost 0 or 1 from the top of your deck as though it were an instant. It costs 1 additional resource to play. 18 health, 4 intellect, Mechanologist hero, sold. This is just like a young hero that allows you to look at the top card of your deck before you boost. If you're just playing like a boost shell with it, so that you know whether or not it's safe to boost. Cards like the Teklo chest piece where you can gain 2 resources. You can know that you're at least staying even on it. I think that there's a lot of inherent power added in this hero from cards like BIOS update, where you can see if you're going to start by hitting an item. You could just slap a BIOS update in your arsenal and save it until you go, there's an item. All right, time to go. Or just like knowing that you're going to hit not a Tome of Fyendal or not a Command and Conquer. This could just be really powerful for Dash.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this one. It's very interesting, and I think of the three, it seems the hardest to evaluate to me without seeing the full set. You could say the same with Teklevasin because he synergizes with Evos so much, and we need to know more about Evos and like what Evos are going to exist. But Dash, obviously, the 0 or 1 cost item ability, I am sure we're going to be getting more items that meet that condition in the set, so I'm really curious to see what those are. And like you said, the static ability itself is super interesting. Obviously works really well with the boost mechanic, and like basically it's possible that this allows you to put more generics in your mech deck that is still like a pure in general boost focused deck and get away with that. You have Achilles as a last ditch get out of jail in a turn where you want to boost multiple times and you hang on to too many cards and you don't know a generic's coming up, but it gives you a lot of flexible play where if you are doing some blocking and boosting only once during your turn, you can play a deck with like 40 generics if you want to, and if you're only boosting once per turn, you can confidently hold your cards knowing that they're going to hit. So a lot of room to play around there. I'm sure the decks will not have 40 generics, but that's just a potential extreme example. And then, like you touched on, this is another one of these heroes that we've been seeing more and more of that has less than the base starting health, which is an interesting design space. They've definitely been playing with it a lot. Basically, just like printing heroes with more powerful abilities, but trying to balance it by, like with this young hero starting with only 18 life. If there's an adult version printed, it'll be 36. The new Prism recently gives every herald you attack with an incredibly powerful on hit, but of course starts with only 32 life in CC, which is quite a massive dip.
Yeah, but in Blitz, it's been making a little bit of a splash because every time you hit with a Herald, you gain 4 life anyway, essentially, because you just get this Ward 4 Angel in play that's something with an ability, something with an on hit, something with an on attack, something that gains you some amount of life. So it helps close that gap. But in CC, we've just been on such an aggressive format with like Lexi running around that it's not quite there yet. But maybe Prism is another one to discuss when Lexi hits Living Legend. Could be a breakout deck for Worlds, maybe.
Yeah, and on the subject of new Prism in Blitz, Chrissy Ali played her in the team event. His team was actually the one that ultimately knocked my team out of the running, and they made it all the way to the finals playing Prism Advent of Thrones. So just shout out to him and an anecdote of that hero performing well in Blitz.
It's always tough to see somebody place in the same spot every time, but Chris in second place could almost be as good of a pair as me in ninth. So.
Yeah, I felt like I was living on borrowed time for so long. I had never gotten ninth in this game, and I knew it was coming. And recently at Blitz Battle Hardened Salt Lake City, I was playing Chain, and I lost a round in the middle of the day. I think it was a 6-round tournament, and going into round 6, I actually thought I was locked at X1, and I lost to Tyson on Reinar. And I was like, yeah, I'll be 7th or 8th, I think, and I came in the dreaded ninth. So it's obviously very sad in the moment, but I can also relax now knowing that I've gotten my ninth and I'm not just like waiting and living on borrowed time with more eighths.
And I wish I could pop that bubble. That'd be a lovely one for me. But yeah, that touches on some of the Bright Lights heroes. We went through a ban list discussion. We've been on for about 45 minutes now. So don't want to keep it going super long. So let's shift into a wrap up with one final question. That is, who do you have winning Worlds this year? Besides yourself, you can't vote for yourself.
This is a good question. It's a fun one to answer. I'm gonna have to go with Michael Fang, our current reigning Pro Tour champion. He has been on a tear this year, and putting a lot of time and effort into the game. I would love to see him take down the world championship.
Did you listen to the ending of the pod that I recorded with Lucas?
I did not. I started that one, but I haven't gotten to the end.
I asked him that question as well. I said, who do you think's going to win? And my vote was for some guy who's on the screen right now, take down Worlds. So better go take it down so that I can go back to that video and be like, hey, look, I knew, I called it.
I will try my hardest for you, T.
I've got Brodie Spurlock winning Worlds. With that, we are going to wrap it up for the pod for this week. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you for listening. It looks like you've made a nice selection for this week's entry. This is going to be due back in 2 weeks, and I see you there.